Right, so we're on to an Irish red. The beer's coming from a brewery in the Cape, Darling. Let's go through it. Okay, so when you start off with the beer, before we start tasting, there are a couple of places our flavors come from in beer. The first one would be the raw materials. So raw materials, the types of malt, the hops you use, how you process the raw materials in brewhouse will give us some flavors. Then when we get to the cellars, what yeast we use will all contribute to the flavors. What temperature we ferment the beer at. Okay, so let's start off. This is an Irish red. If we were biologists, the type brand for this would be something called Kilkenny, quite a classic commercial beer. Okay, so starting with the tasting, we start with, and I'm going to get quite technical because that's my nature. I don't know how to do light. I jump into technical. Okay, we start off with something called a drive-by sniff, right? So don't stick your nose right into the glass. And we're looking for there's a flavor, an off flavor called Lightstruck. Who's come across Lightstruck? You may have, yes. You're going to tell us about Lightstruck? Who's going to tell us about Lightstruck? No? Okay, so Lightstruck, you got it? Skunky, spot on. Okay, cheers, well done. Okay, so skunky is a flavor caused by ultraviolet reacting with the hops. And that's why good beers are packed in brown glass. Brown glass gives better protection against UV ingress than clear glass or green glass. So this doesn't have Lightstruck, right? An alternative, if you don't know what a skunk smells like, I'm born and bred, grown up South African. We don't have skunks in South Africa. But latex gloves, right? That rubbery, to me, classic Lightstruck. And you'd pick it up. If you stick your nose too deep into the glass, you won't pick it up. Okay, so we're looking for any obvious faults. Now we're going to get a little bit closer and stick your nose into the glass, smell, have a look at the color, look at the appearance. The appearance, beautiful coppery color, right? And that's coming from the malt. So they're using some black malt, they're adding in some crystal malt, which is giving you this lovely coppery color. We're looking at, okay, so I'm jumping onto appearance where I should still be sitting on aroma. So malt on the aroma, toffee, caramel. And when we're looking at aromas, we're also looking for any flavor faults, right? So a couple of heavy flavor faults here might be when the brewers used chlorinated water, tap water, just normal tap water's got small amounts of chlorine in, and the chlorine would react to the malt and produce chlorophenols, right? Chlorophenols taste like, smell like, you don't have to taste it. TCP, antiseptic, elastoplast plasters, right? It smells like antiseptic, all right? So we aren't getting that here. Okay, but we get lovely, lovely toffee caramel flavors. Right, appearance, we're looking at the color, very important. Consumers, when they look at a beer, the color's important. The clarity. Some beers are meant to be clear. This beer is meant to be clear. Slight haze is okay, but it's not meant to be yeasty like a wheat beer. Okay, so, all right. And then we look at the foam, appearance. So the type beer for this, Kilkenny, has a very fine foam. That fine foam comes from nitrogenation. So they mix CO2 and nitrogen gas. Nitrogen gas is very insoluble in beer. So when you pour it into the glass or you open the can, it will form a very fine foam. So you look at this foam and it's a normal beer foam. Okay, if you get to a Guinness, especially a draft Guinness or a Kilkenny, you'll find a very, very fine foam. This doesn't have it. It's okay. All right. The other thing about a CO2 foam is what you'll find is the bubbles are unevenly sized. With a nitrogen foam, very even and small bubbles. Let's get into the tasting. Too much talking going on here. Right, so take a fairly substantial sip, swirl it round, feel the carbonation on your tongue, swallow. There's a bit of bitterness at the back, but can you taste that malty sweetness? It's not sugar sweetness. There is no sweetness in this beer. It's perceived sweetness, right? So when you smell toffee, caramel, right, biscuity, you smell biscuits, you don't taste it. So it's a perceived biscuity. You're not tasting that, in this case, sweetness. Right, let's go for it. Right, now, a good beer. Okay, so this beer is what we'd call malt forward. The focal point in this beer is the malt, right? You get that toffee, malty flavor in the mouth. At the center, at the back of your tongue, just behind the center, back of your tongue, you get the bitterness. And a good beer, the bitterness should be there and it should fade away. And then as it fades away, like a good Durban curry, that burn goes away, it should entice you to go for that next sip. So as the bitterness goes away, I'll have another sip. All right. The other thing we notice in this beer, astringency. What's astringency? If you make a cup of tea, you know when you put the tea bag in the mug, and then you're busy studying, all you students, you boil the kettle, you put the tea bag in, you fill it up, and then you get distracted. And you come back and that tea it's strong. But if you drink that as black tea, the tannins cause that astringency. So really what happens there is, and I'm going to go technical with you, but polyphenols are tannins and they bind to proteins. In your saliva, you have proteins, amylases, and these tannins bind to your saliva. So when you take a sip, the tongue goes dry. Now that dryness you somewhat want, because that dryness makes the beer refreshing. If the beer doesn't have any astringency, it can be satiating. And again, we're sitting in a nice hot climate, and people want to drink beers for refreshment. You don't want to drink go back to the wine industry. You know, if you've done a 5-kilometer park run on a Saturday, you don't come off the 5-kilometer run and think, I'd kill for a nice mug of sherry, right? No, sherry has a time and place. It's in winter when it's cold and you want something sweet. This is about refreshment. Okay, so mouthfeel, we look a little bit further down. The mouthfeel, we're looking at what's the body, right? So how much residual carbohydrates are left. So this one's quite low, and it's meant to be. This is meant to be a nice, drinkable, happy, cheerful, all day, every day beer. Okay. All right, the carbonation is also part of that mouthfeel, the bite on the tongue, the astringency. Okay. Astringency can come from the hops, but it can also come from the malt. Okay. And it should finish nice and clean, get you into going for another sip. Right, so any comments? What did you like about it? Okay, what did you like about it?
Well, I'm not a beer person, so...
Let's correct that, not a beer person yet. Okay. All right. So, and guys, this is a big thing here about this whole beer appreciation is some of us are searching for the perfect beer, even if you find a beer you don't like, just keep searching. Eventually you will find a beer that is for you. Okay, and I think another big thing that we need to get over in South Africa is we tend to think beer is, and I'm going to go there, Castle, Black Label, Hansa, Amstel, whereas this is definitely not a pale lager, right? We don't have any of the big commercial beers that are talking malt. Maybe coming close to it is a milk stout, but right, so comments. What did you like about it? So it's that flavor, yep, flavor, but yet not satiating. Dry. Yeah. And it's one of those things, the eternal joke. If I knew I was going to be so thirsty this morning, I would have had more beer last night, right? And it's this dryness entices you to take another sip. Okay. So where does this beer come from? So the style come from, a little bit of history. It comes out of, it was the Irish interpretation of an English bitter. Okay, so it's meant to be and the English bitter, your bread and butter of the British brewing industry is the normal man in the street. Wine is very, should we say, I want to say snobbish, but that would be impolite of me. But beer is not about snobism. It's about, this is just good beer. Okay, for the everyday chap or girl. Okay. Right, other comments? If you avoid eye contact, then I might hone in on you. Are you avoiding eye contact? All right. Good beer. Okay. Lovely color, lovely foam, lovely aroma. And the awesome thing for me about this is this has all been done without any synthetic, you didn't have to add flavors in. This all comes from the process. Okay. All right. So one of the other things I mentioned to the other group, and I need to be sure I'm not repeating myself, or I need to repeat myself. Each beer should have a focal point. You know, if we get to a beer designed by a committee, and these guys want hop aroma because they love hop aroma. We've got the micro department, and we definitely need to use a Saccharomyces yeast with the pad gene in because that will produce some nice yeast flavors. And then we've got people over here who come from the malting background and it must have malt. And we need the brewhouse people want, right? The thing with any work of art is it needs a focal point. So as you go through, they've very cleverly selected 4 beers with 4 different focal points. The one is the acidity, the other one is the dark malt flavors. Over here we've got the malt. So the bitterness is supporting the malt, right? You can't have an unfocused beer, all right? Which one of my criticisms sometimes of people starting out homebrewing is they want to optimize everything at once. All right.
One of the things I often end up putting in score sheets is that the flavors are muddled. And you get that with home brewers especially, but commercial brewers as well. And it's exactly that, when you're trying to put too much in, and it just ends up being this kind of fruit salad, but not in a good way. So yeah, I like that point.
Any other comments? So where are you guys from? You all got your jackets on, so I can't see. I think I did see a UJ. UJ, there we go. And comments here?
I like the caramel malt on the. I can feel the caramel malt in the sort of a caramel fan, so I like the caramel malt. Yes.
So it's caramel without being sugar sweet. Okay. You know, when we think caramel, we think Nestle, you know that toffee that you find next to the condensed milk caramel. This is caramel, but it's not sweet. Good, thank you. Am I allowed to call you Ntate? Let's hear your comment. It's just, hold it.
All right. Okay. Generally, my concern will be more on the foam part. It easily dissipates, and I was expecting that it will dry on the glass just to see if there's high protein in it. So I'm just concerned about the dissipation of the foam in it. But it's a good beer.
So if I can just repeat or point out the observation there. The foam, one of the things brewers like is something called lacing. Lacing is that fine foam that sticks to the side of the glass as you're taking a sip. Now, correct observation is it would have been nice to see a little bit more lacing, right? Lacing comes from the proteins coming from the malt. It also is contributed, or what the hops contribute to the lacing, and calcium, magnesium, divalent ions. And there isn't too much of that on this glass. So good observation. And it's one of those ones, to be honest, I'm sitting 30 years in the brewing industry and I don't quite understand. Bitterness, I understand how to control. Lacing, even a brand from batch to batch, sometimes a batch has beautiful lacing and other times it doesn't. And it could be glass washer, right? I was at one outlet, asked me to come in. They had their foam, their beer had no foam, and they were complaining about the product. And so what we did was we poured. So when you pour a draft, if you push the tap backwards, you get pure foam. So we filled up the whole glass with foam and just watched it. And as you watched, it looked like Table Mountain. So the foam was collapsing on the side, and you had a nice stable foam in the center. Glassware. So then we went and checked, and what was happening was this outlet had bought Miele glass washers, right? The Rolls-Royce of glass washers. The problem with this Rolls-Royce glass washer is it took 40 minutes to wash a load of glasses. Very busy pump, and what the barman figured out is once it was cleaning for 5 minutes, you could interrupt the program, pull out the glasses, put another set of glasses in, close, and that way he was being more efficient with the detergent, and he wasn't running out of glasses. The problem was the glasses were not being rinsed properly because the dishwasher hadn't gone through the full cycle. And if you go into cleaning, detergents, one of the key factors in detergents is something called surfactants, reducing surface tension. And so what was happening was these half-washed glasses, by the way, they were beautifully clean after 5 minutes, but they still had some residue of detergent. So it was collapsing around the side and stable on the outside. Okay. Good. Chow chocolate. Have some chips. You can trade chocolates for peanuts. Some are, I think, just watching them, they're not going to trade. Okay, that's me. Over and out.